The scent hit me like a warning flare the moment Anna set the plate down. My favorite, chicken and mushroom cream, but the sharp, chemical sweetness beneath the aroma made my stomach knot. I caught her eyes and saw a smile too wide, too forced. "I made this just for you, Mom," she said, her voice trembling in the wrong places. Beside me, her husband, Daniel, scrolled his phone without even glancing up. No one noticed when I slid my plate in front of him with a calm, deliberate movement. An hour later, Daniel's phone clattered to the floor as he collapsed onto the table. His body shook, lips turning a sickly shade of purple. Anna screamed, clutching his shoulders, calling his name again and again. Her voice cracked, but there was no true confusion in her eyes, only the panic of someone watching a plan unravel. I sat frozen, hands trembling as I watched paramedics rush him out on a stretcher 20 minutes later. Anna followed, her performance flawless, sobbing like a heartbroken wife. But I had already seen enough. The plates, the smell, the hollow words, it had all been for me. My own daughter had tried to poison me. It all began just 3 days before. She had shown up at my house with a thick folder of charts and numbers, insisting she needed $200,000 to expand her boutique. "Mom, this is a safe investment. I'll double your money in 2 years." She flashed that same eager smile I'd seen since she was a child. But I noticed the strain behind it, the desperation that didn't match her words. I had built my own company from the ground up after her father died, and I knew when numbers were too perfect. Her projections weren't realistic, they were fantasies dressed as facts. When I told her I needed time to review, her warmth evaporated. "Time? You don't trust me," she snapped, her voice rising with sharpness I'd never heard from her. Daniel, who usually kept quiet in my home, stood with unsettling calm. "Mrs. Harris, Anna's worked hard on this project. Even a partial amount would show family support." His tone was polite, but the weight behind it carried something darker, almost demanding. It was the first time he had challenged me so directly. That night, I couldn't shake the unease. Anna had always been proud, determined to do things on her own. Why now was she begging, and why was Daniel pushing so hard? The next morning, I called David, my longtime accountant and confidant. "David," I said, lowering my voice, "I need you to dig into Anna's boutique." Quietly. "Something doesn't add up." I didn't know then how right I was. "Mrs. Harris, I'll have answers for you in 2 days," David's voice echoed in my mind. While I waited for his investigation, I paid close attention to Anna and Daniel. They began showing up at my house every day, which was unlike them. Anna grew more jittery each time, her hands fidgeting, her eyes darting. Daniel was always glued to his phone, cutting off calls the moment I stepped into the room. The tension between us was thick enough to suffocate. The night before Anna cooked that so-called special dinner, David finally called back. His words confirmed the unease that had been gnawing at me. "Margaret, Anna's boutique isn't thriving, it's bankrupt. She's drowning in over $300,000 of debt. And Daniel, he's worse. He's deep into gambling. He owes serious money to people who won't hesitate to collect by force." My heart sank as I listened. My only child, my Anna, was standing on the edge of a cliff, and she hadn't told me the truth. They hadn't come begging for investment money, they had been fighting for survival. And when I said no, when I didn't hand over my fortune, they turned to desperation. Now, sitting in that same kitchen after Daniel had been carried away unconscious, everything clicked into place. The strange smell, the forced smile, the way she pushed the plate toward me. My own daughter had decided my life was worth less than the inheritance she thought she'd gain. 3 hours later, Anna returned from the hospital. Her mascara streaked her cheeks, and her hands shook as she clutched a glass of water. "Daniel's stable, Mom. The doctors don't understand what happened. They say it looks like poisoning. Her voice wavered as she sat across from me at the very table where it had all happened. "Mom," she whispered, "I need you to tell me exactly what you cooked tonight. The doctors have to know what ingredients you used." I leaned back in my chair, staring straight into her eyes. "I didn't cook anything, Anna." "You did. You said yourself it was made especially for me." Her face blanched. "Yes, but I used your ingredients, your usual recipe." Her words tumbled out, scattered and uneven. Then her tone sharpened. "Why did you switch the plates, Mom? Why did Daniel eat your portion?" I rose from my chair slowly, feeling every one of my 69 years pressing down on me. Because the smell wasn't right. Because something in that food didn't belong there. Anna's gaze dropped to the table. She fiddled with her phone, her voice soft but evasive. "I don't know what you're talking about. You're upset because of everything that's happened. Maybe you should rest." But I couldn't rest. Not when every instinct I had screamed the truth. "Anna," I said firmly, my voice steady, "look me in the eye and tell me you didn't put anything strange in my food." Her eyes flicked up to meet mine, but only for a moment. "Of course not, Mom. How could you even think that? I'm your daughter. I love you. I'd never hurt you." Her words sounded rehearsed, hollow, as though she'd practiced them in front of a mirror. I wanted to believe her, but the unease inside me grew heavier. That night, after she left to return to the hospital, I wandered the quiet halls of my house. The silence pressed down like a weight. Every creak of the floorboards made me tense. I touched the picture frames on the walls, Anna with her gap-toothed smile as a child, Anna in her cap and gown on graduation day, Anna in her wedding dress, radiant and glowing as she stood beside Daniel. When had it all shifted? When had my sweet little girl become someone capable of such betrayal? I thought back over the years, and the timeline became painfully clear. It had been subtle at first: missed family dinners, a growing obsession with money, a distance that widened with every passing season. Then Daniel came along 5 years ago, smooth-talking, polished, and just a little too perfect. He charmed her, but I'd always seen something I couldn't quite trust. Now I knew I hadn't been wrong. And the truth was more terrifying than I'd ever imagined. My daughter had tried to kill me. And she had done it for him. There had always been something in Daniel's eyes that unsettled me, a kind of coldness that never matched his charming words. When I learned that he and Anna had married in secret, without inviting me, without even a phone call, I knew something wasn't right. "It was spontaneous, Mom," Anna had explained later, forcing a laugh. "We just decided to do it, the two of us." But I knew better. My daughter had dreamed of a big wedding since she was a teenager, with flowers, family, and friends gathered to celebrate. A rushed courthouse ceremony wasn't her idea of happiness. It was his. The months that followed were filled with excuses. Daniel always had some new project, some promising deal that required money, though he never explained details. Anna stopped visiting as often, and when she did, she carried herself like a guest fulfilling an obligation, not a daughter coming home. Our talks grew shallow. She avoided deeper conversations, filling the air with small talk that ended in uncomfortable silences. 6 months earlier, I remembered, she'd come over for lunch but barely touched her plate. Then she'd asked me, out of nowhere, "Mom, have you ever felt trapped in your own life?" Her question startled me. "What do you mean, honey?" I asked, watching her push food around with her fork. She kept her eyes down. "Sometimes I feel like I don't have control anymore. Like someone else is making all the big decisions for me." At the time, I thought she was simply stressed, juggling her boutique, the pressures of adulthood, the weight of responsibility. But replaying that conversation now, I saw the truth. She had been reaching out for help in the only way she could, slipping through the cracks of her own courage. Daniel's influence was already tightening around her, shaping her choices, pushing her to come to me for money. Maybe Anna had been a victim before she became complicit. But none of that excused what she had done. Poisoning your own mother was a line no circumstance could justify. That night, as I walked the quiet halls of my home, I came to a decision that tightened my chest but steadied my heart. Silence would be cowardice. Pretending nothing had happened would only invite more danger. I couldn't let betrayal slide beneath the rug of family loyalty. The next morning, Anna showed up at my door before I'd even had my coffee. Her face was pale, her hair unkempt, the exhaustion of sleepless hours etched under her eyes. "Daniel's still in the hospital," she said flatly, without even a hello. "The doctors say it was poisoning from toxic plants. They're investigating what he might have eaten." Her eyes searched mine, as though hunting for a hint of guilt. "Mom, I need to ask you, are there any plants in your garden that could be poisonous?" Her question was too pointed, too rehearsed. I felt the ice rise in my chest. "Anna, I've tended the same herbs and flowers in that garden for 30 years. Nothing out there has ever poisoned anyone." My voice came out colder than I expected. She sank onto the sofa, shoulders sagging. "Then I don't understand. It's like," she paused, her gaze darting away. "It's like someone put something in the food on purpose." Her words lingered like smoke, heavy and suffocating. She didn't accuse me outright, but the suggestion hung in the air. "Anna, enough." My own voice startled me, it carried no trace of softness, only steel. "Stop pretending. I know what you did. You put something in that dinner. You tried to poison me." The mask she had been wearing cracked instantly. Her eyes widened, her lips parted, panic flashing across her face before she scrambled to rebuild her facade. "What are you talking about, Mom? That's insane. You're imagining things because you're upset." But her hands betrayed her. They trembled as she tried to steady the glass of water on the table. She couldn't even meet my eyes. "Why would I ever hurt you?" she insisted, her voice breaking, the words tumbling out too quickly. "You're my mother. I love you." I stood, a surge of strength filling me in a way I hadn't felt in years. "Because you need money. Because Daniel has gambling debts. Because your boutique is collapsing under $300,000 of debt. Because you're desperate." Her face drained of color with every word. I pressed on. "Yes, Anna. I know everything. I checked before I ever gave you my answer about the money." She shook her head wildly, her voice rising with desperation. "No, you don't know what you're talking about. My finances are fine. My business is growing." But every syllable rang hollow. The more she spoke, the more her voice cracked, her composure unraveling before me. "Mom, please," she whispered, her hands clasped tightly as if begging for mercy. But the daughter I had loved and raised for 37 years felt like a stranger now, a stranger whose choices had carved an unbridgeable distance between us. "Don't tell me I've been fed lies," I snapped, pushing the bank statement across the table so the numbers faced Anna like a mirror. Her cheeks flamed and she hunched forward, fingers twisting into the edge of the sofa. "Who would lie to me?" she whispered, but I was already answering for her with a list that had clawed at me for days. "David found it," I said. "The ledger shows your boutique hasn't turned a profit in 8 months. The private investigator I hired followed Daniel. He's been at illegal card rooms and owes $500,000 to people who don't ask politely for what they want." Each sentence landed harder than the last. Anna gasped and folded in on herself, the sound of it filling the room like a confession. She went rigid, then crumpled onto the cushions, burying her face in her hands. Her shoulders shook. "You don't understand," she sobbed. "We're trapped. They said if we don't pay, they'll hurt us. They said," her voice broke into a series of gasps and pleas. "Please, Mom. You don't know what it's like. They make you do things. The words were a splinter in my chest. I had wanted to believe she'd been manipulated, that the man she'd married was the villain and she the victim. Hearing her say it out loud made my stomach turn. Then she lifted her head, mascara streaked down her face, and the truth fell from her like something too heavy to hold. It was Daniel's idea, she whispered. He said it would be quick, that you wouldn't suffer. He said it would look like a heart attack. Her hands trembled as she searched my face for understanding that I didn't have. I didn't want to hurt you, Mom. I never. Then tell me exactly what you put in my food. My voice was low, but every word was edged with cold steel. I needed the facts, the ugly practicality of what had been done. She barely breathed the name. Oleander, she said, so small I almost missed it. He brought it. He said he knew someone who showed him how. He said we'd get everything, we could pay them, leave, start over. She covered her mouth, as if the sound might undo the deed. It sounded like salvation, at the time. I'm so sorry. The confession hung in the air like a chemical sting. Oleander, one word, but enough to redraw the map of my life. The daughter who had been my constant companion for 37 years had just told me, in the most ordinary terms, how she tried to have me killed. My head went bright and cold, and for a moment I felt as if the walls themselves were judging me. After you killed me, what then? I asked, forcing myself to stay steady. The question felt ridiculous and necessary at once. She answered with frantic, uneven breath. We'd inherit everything. The house, your accounts, pay off the debts. Daniel promised we could run away. I didn't think. You didn't think. My laugh was small and vicious. Anna, you're grown. No one forced you to plan my death. You chose it. My words were sharper than I meant, but they were true. Desperation didn't absolve intent. She rose to her feet as if on a string, voice urgent and pleading. Mom, please. Not the police. If you call them, Daniel and I will go to jail, and those men will still come after us. You'll be alone. You'll lose us. Please, lend us the money. Just enough. We'll go, we'll never bother you again. I'll make it right. Her arms reached for me, eyes wild and wet. The absurdity of her plea made my ribs ache. You want me to give you money after you tried to kill me? The words came out raw. You expect me to hand over my life to the people who nearly took it? I pushed back from the table and stood, older, yes, but not fragile. Not easily bent. I am not your lifeline for a crime. I am not your accomplice. She stepped toward the door, desperation pouring from her like a tide. Mom, think, once you do this, there's no taking it back. You'll have no family. I'm the only person left who cares for you. Her voice twisted into something that tried to sound like guilt and leverage at once. Family. The word landed hollow between us. You surrendered that the moment you put poison in my food. I felt my throat tighten with something like grief, then harden into resolve. I won't be blackmailed by a threat dressed as filial sorrow. You must leave my house now. Anna faltered, tears streaking down her face. For a second she looked like the little girl who once smeared jam on her chin and begged for an extra story at bedtime, and my heart wanted to shatter. But the sight only clarified what had to be done. I opened the front door wide. You have until I close this door, I said. Out. Now. My voice held no malice, only the quiet authority of someone who had spent decades building a life on rules, contracts, and consequences. She hesitated, then took a step back, voice small and broken. Are you going to call them? The police. She tried to sound terrified for both of us, and the manipulation prickled like nettles. Think of what you'll lose. What I'd lose, I said, looking at her without flinching, is the illusion that I could trust the person who tried to kill me. I lost that the moment you crossed that line. I didn't say I would call the police yet, because right now I needed to breathe and sort the next steps. But the decision to hold her accountable had already settled in my chest like a stone. She moved toward the threshold, reluctant, and then out into the late afternoon light, a figure I had once raised now shrinking into something I barely recognized. The front door clicked shut behind her, and the house felt suddenly too large, painfully empty. I stood in the silence, angry, betrayed, and resolute, knowing that whatever came next I would face it with the law and the truth on my side. I already lost you, I said, my voice hollow, drained of every ounce of strength. I lost you the moment you decided my death was a reasonable price for your survival. My finger pointed toward the front yard like the strike of a judge's gavel. Go, Anna. Leave this house before I make a choice that neither of us can undo. She froze at the door, her hand hovering on the frame. Mom, if you send me away, you're condemning me. You're signing my death warrant. These people don't forgive. Without the money, Daniel and I have nowhere to hide. Her tone was desperate, the last defense of someone cornered by her own lies. You should have thought of that before you mixed poison into my dinner, I replied, every word sharp as glass. You should have thought about the consequences before you decided your debts outweighed my life. I pushed the door shut, and the sound reverberated through the house like a tomb ceiling. I stood there, hand pressed against the wood, listening to the fading rhythm of her footsteps on the gravel, each one dragging away a piece of me. My knees buckled, and I steadied myself against the wall, fighting the dizziness rising from my chest. The realization tore through me, my only child had plotted my murder. Not strangers, not enemies, Anna. The girl I had rocked to sleep, whose scraped knees I had bandaged, whose dreams I had encouraged. I couldn't stay in the house another second. Panic propelled me outside into the cool night air. My legs carried me down the street almost of their own accord, the pounding of my heart loud in my ears. At 69, I wasn't built for running, but fear turned me into a fugitive, fleeing a home that no longer felt like mine. I found myself at Brenda Johnson's door, the neighbor who had been a constant for 15 years. I banged on the door with shaking fists, ignoring the late hour. Brenda, please, I cried out, my voice cracking, it's Margaret. I need you. The door opened, revealing Brenda in her robe, curlers framing her gray hair. Her expression shifted instantly from sleepy surprise to alarm. Margaret, dear Lord, what's happened? She ushered me in without hesitation, her warm hands gripping my cold fingers as if to keep me tethered to the earth. She sat me on her living room sofa, the familiar floral cushions a strange comfort. Within minutes she returned with steaming chamomile tea, the scent wrapping around me like a blanket. I cradled the mug, though my hands trembled so violently the tea sloshed over the rim. My own daughter tried to poison me, Brenda, I blurted out, unable to dam the flood any longer. Anna wanted to kill me, for money. The words spilled out in a torrent, everything I had carried alone pouring into the quiet safety of Brenda's home. Brenda froze mid-step, her honey-brown eyes widening in disbelief. What are you saying? She whispered. Anna tried to poison you. She sat down across from me, her voice no more than a trembling thread. Tell me everything, Margaret. Every last detail. And so I did. I told her about Anna's request for $200,000, my suspicions, the dinner, the smell, the moment I switched plates with Daniel. I described his collapse, the hospital, the lies, the confession of Oleander. I confessed the confrontation, the tears, and the cold certainty that I could no longer protect my daughter without destroying myself. Brenda listened without interruption, her face tightening with every detail. When I finished, she sat back, arms crossed tightly over her chest. Margaret, this is worse than you realize. If Anna tried once, she may try again. And now that she knows you know the truth, you're a threat to her and Daniel both. Her words hit like stones, heavy but undeniable. I can't turn her over to the police, I whispered, my tears falling into the tea. She's my daughter. My Anna. All my life I've loved her, protected her. How can I be the one to destroy her life? Brenda slid closer, wrapping her arms around me in the kind of embrace I hadn't felt in years, firm, motherly, unwavering. Margaret, listen to me. Loving your child doesn't mean letting them destroy you. Anna made her choices. She crossed the line no parent ever imagines. That wasn't you, it was her. But she's all I have left, I wept into her shoulder. If I hand her over, I'll be completely alone in this world. Brenda pulled back just enough to look me in the eye, her voice steady but filled with compassion. No, Margaret. You won't be alone. You'll have me. You'll have the peace of knowing you stood up for yourself. And you'll have the truth. Sometimes, the greatest act of love is refusing to let someone sink deeper into their sins. Her words carved through my despair, leaving behind something unexpected, a glimmer of strength, faint but real. Then maybe, I whispered, my voice trembling, the time has come to choose justice over silence. I have no one else, I whispered, my voice breaking. No other children, no siblings. My parents have been gone for decades. The weight of that truth pressed against my chest like a stone. You're not alone, Brenda said with a firmness that startled me. She took both my hands, her grip steady. You have me, Margaret. We're going to face this together. She pulled back just enough to look directly into my eyes. For 15 years, you've been more than a neighbor to me. Your family, the sister of my heart. And I will not let Anna destroy you. Her words pierced through the fog of despair, reaching someplace inside me I hadn't realized was starving for love. All these years, I'd been so consumed with Anna, her happiness, her struggles, her dreams, that I hadn't noticed I had someone else who truly cared. But what can we do? I asked, my voice thin and frightened. I don't have hard proof. Only her words, and she could deny everything. We need to be smart, Brenda said, her voice brisk now, focused. She grabbed a notebook and pen from her side table and began to write. First, you're going to document everything. Every detail, every conversation, every suspicion. If we end up needing the police or a lawyer, this record will matter. I watched her scribble quickly, her expression fierce with determination. But Brenda, I said, my voice trembling, do you really think she'd try again? She knows I know now. It would be too obvious if something happened to me. She looked up, her eyes heavy with the seriousness I'd seen only once before, when her husband passed and she had to keep the family business afloat. Margaret, when someone crosses the line into trying to kill their own mother, all bets are off. Anna is desperate, and desperate people don't think rationally. And don't forget Daniel. From what you've told me, he's knee-deep in gambling debts with dangerous people. If they can't get the money one way, they'll look for another. Her words chilled me to my bones. The night crept by slowly. Brenda refused to let me return home, insisting I stay under her roof. For the first time in days, I felt some measure of safety, though sleep was elusive. Every time I closed my eyes, Anna's face appeared, the forced smile as she set down that poison plate, the panic when I confronted her, the cold calculation beneath her tears. When dawn finally broke, I stumbled into Brenda's kitchen, where she was already frying eggs and pouring black coffee. You got a little sleep, she said, eyeing me closely. But not enough. She placed a steaming mug in front of me. Today we make decisions. We can't sit still in fear. I wrapped my hands around the cup, grateful for the ritual of a normal morning. What do you suggest? Because I honestly don't even know where to begin. I never thought I'd face something like this. Brenda sat down with her own coffee, her gaze steady. First, we'll go to your house together so you can gather some essentials. But we'll be careful, If we see any sign of Anna or Daniel, we leave. No questions asked. She sipped her coffee before continuing. Then we need to talk to someone who can actually help. A lawyer, maybe even the police. I hesitated, fear tightening my throat. And if Anna was telling the truth about those people, the ones Daniel owes money to, then by reporting her, aren't we sentencing her to death? The maternal guilt surged again, heavier than ever. Brenda reached across the table, her warm hand gripping mine. Margaret, listen to me. Anna and Daniel created this mess. You are not responsible for the consequences of their choices. Being a mother doesn't mean sacrificing your life so your daughter can cover up her crimes. Love doesn't mean letting her kill you. Her words stung, but deep down I knew they were true. At 10 that morning, Brenda walked beside me back to my house, her posture protective, her eyes scanning the street like a guard. If we see Daniel's car or anything suspicious, we're out. Understood, she reminded me for the third time as we stepped up the path to my front door. The moment I pushed the door open, a heaviness hit me. It wasn't just memory, it was real. The house felt tainted, as though betrayal itself lingered in the walls. Brenda marched straight to the kitchen, her instincts sharp. I stood frozen in the foyer, my body unwilling to move past the space where I'd last faced Anna. Margaret. Brenda's voice cut through the silence, urgent and sharp. Get in here, now. My heart lurched. Her tone carried an edge that froze me in place before instinct made me rush toward the kitchen. Brenda stood at the sink, holding something with a dish towel as though it were a live wire. Margaret, she said quietly but urgently. Look at this. In her hands was a small glass jar, the kind I used for spices. My breath caught in my throat the instant I saw the handwriting on its label. It was Anna's distinctive calligraphy, smooth loops and elegant strokes I had once praised on birthday cards and school projects. Ground oleander, the label read. The words punched the air out of my lungs. Oh my God, I whispered, my knees nearly buckling. She actually brought it here. Brenda nodded grimly. It was hidden behind the cinnamon and paprika. Your daughter left the evidence right in your own kitchen. She held it carefully, avoiding direct contact with the glass. The sight of that jar made everything horrifyingly tangible. This wasn't just suspicion or whispered confessions. It was poison. Real, deliberate, deadly poison. There's more, Brenda said, moving with a purposeful calm as she opened the cabinet beneath the sink. She pulled out a crumpled pair of used latex gloves from the trash and a dishcloth smeared with green residue. Leaves. She ground them up here. This wasn't a heat-of-the-moment act, Margaret. This was planned. Calculated. Each new discovery felt like another blade sliding between my ribs. I'd spent years defending Anna, telling myself she was just stressed, that Daniel was a bad influence, that she'd come around. But standing in that kitchen, staring at the evidence of her betrayal, I felt the ground tilt under me. Brenda took out her phone, her fingers steady as she snapped picture after picture. We have to document everything before anyone comes back to clean it up. If Anna realizes she left these things here, she'll return to destroy the evidence. What else could there be? I asked, a sick mix of horror and curiosity in my voice. What else did she leave behind? Let's check her room, Brenda said. The one she used when she stayed here. Maybe there's more. We went upstairs to the second floor, to the bedroom where Anna had spent countless nights growing up, the room I had left untouched since she moved in with Daniel. The pink sheets she'd picked when she was 12 still covered the bed. Her old trophies lined the shelves. Photographs of happier times hung on the walls. My heart ached as we stepped inside. Brenda went straight to the desk, pulling open drawers with a precision that unnerved me. There's something here, she murmured, sliding a folded sheet of paper out from beneath a book. She unfolded it and began to read aloud. Oleander. Get fresh leaves. Gloves. Mortar and pestle to crush. Opportunity, special dinner. Call ambulance after 30 minutes. I stared at the page, numb. Anna's handwriting was unmistakable. The same clear, neat lettering she'd used on Mother's Day cards and grocery lists now detailed a plan to kill me. It's a to-do list, I said, my voice barely audible. A checklist for my murder. Brenda's face hardened as she scanned the rest of the page. There's more. Check if change is needed. Approximate inheritance $2.8 million. Daniel's debts $500,000. Enough left for a new life. The room spun around me. They had calculated exactly how much my death was worth. Exactly how much of me they needed to erase to start over. I sank down on the edge of the bed, the same bed where Anna had slept after bad dreams as a child. My hands trembled against the pink comforter. How could I have missed it? I whispered. How did I not see my own daughter turning into this? Brenda sat beside me, taking my hands firmly in hers. Because you're a mother, Margaret. You loved her. You trusted her. You wanted to believe the best. That's not weakness, that's who you are. Anna made her own choices. You didn't make her this way. Her words soothed, but they couldn't erase the guilt gnawing at me. Let's keep looking, she said softly. The more evidence we gather, the stronger your case will be. We combed through the room slowly, methodically, as if turning over the layers of my heartbreak. Then Brenda's voice cut through the silence, trembling. Margaret, come here. You need to see this. She was kneeling in front of the closet, a manila envelope in her hands. Inside were copies of my will, bank statements, insurance policies, all neatly organized. On the back of one sheet, Anna's handwriting filled the margins with calculations, dates, liquidation times, percentages. They weren't guessing, Brenda said quietly. They planned every step, how to access your accounts, how long it would take to cash out your investments after your death. I stared at the papers, unable to breathe. My daughter hadn't just thought about killing me. She had plotted my absence down to the last cent. There was a folded note in the envelope that emptied whatever strength I had left. Brenda's hands trembled as she unfolded it and began to read aloud. My name, Margaret, was at the top in Anna's neat handwriting. The date was 3 weeks old. Dear Mom, Brenda read, and the words hit like a fist. If you're reading this, it means something went wrong. Every sentence felt like a betrayal newly sharpened. The letter explained, in chillingly candid language, that Anna and Daniel had talked about what they believed was their only escape. They were scared, the note said, the lenders were relentless. We never wanted you to suffer, the letter said. We thought it would be quick. We thought the doctors would blame age and stress. It named Oleander as the method and described, in clinical detail, how it would mimic a heart attack. Brenda's voice softened and stumbled over some lines, the horror in the room settling like dust. The note went on to outline how they would hide their tracks, the roles they would play at my funeral, and how they planned to divide the estate. After debts were paid, they would start over, Anna wrote. Costa Rica and Panama were even listed as potential destinations. It's a how-to guide, Brenda said, folding the paper back into the envelope with a disgust I felt down to my bones. This wasn't a panic move. This was deliberate. She pulled out another sheet, spreadsheets and sums, precise calculations of debts, projected inheritance, timelines for liquidating accounts. The numbers were brutal in their clarity, 2 columns that turned my life into figures. They've worked this out down to the penny, Brenda murmured. They knew exactly how much they needed and how much would be left. I felt the room tilt. My child had reduced me to arithmetic, an asset to be converted. There were receipts next, a nursery purchase for plants, a small card from an online order for a mortar and pestle, a printout of a web page describing symptoms consistent with oleander poisoning. One slip was even worse, a bookmarked search titled, "How to Act Grieving to Avoid Suspicion." I wanted to throw up. The idea that Anna had rehearsed sorrow like a role was unbearable. How could she? I began, but there was no way to finish the thought. Brenda handed me a paper with more notes in Anna's precise hand, dates, contingency plans, even a checklist for removing traces after the fact. They had envisioned every possible complication and written solutions for them. "You can see now," Brenda said quietly, but her eyes were fierce. "This goes far beyond a desperate, last-minute error. This is premeditation." My chest tightened. The room that had once held children's laughter now held cold proof that the person who'd written lullabies to me in the dark had drafted a murder plot in ink. Grief and fury braided together until I could hardly breathe. "What do we do?" I whispered, the question feeling small and hollow. Turning them in felt like shattering the last shard of family I had, not turning them in felt like letting a predator roam free. Brenda folded the papers back into the envelope with deliberate care. "We cannot cover this up," she said. "This is criminal. We need legal counsel and we need law enforcement." Her voice carried the weight of someone who had watched life's hard realities and learned there was no substitute for action. "I'm afraid if we involve the police, those men Daniel owes will come after them," I said, tears blurring the ink on the page. "We might be signing their death warrants." Brenda squeezed my hand. "If they're right about that, then they brought those consequences on themselves. You can't be the perp's accomplice because you're afraid of fallout. You'll only make it easier for them to harm someone else." We stood there, surrounded by the paper map of betrayal, the receipts, the searches, the letter that felt like a confession written in the calm eye of a storm. There was no going back to ignorance. The evidence was clear, damning, and suffocating. Brenda tucked the envelope into her bag and met my eyes. "We call David first," she said. "Then we find a lawyer. We preserve everything, and we do it together." I nodded, shakily. My daughter's handwriting stared up at me from the pile, familiar and deadly, and something inside me shifted from stunned to resolved. The house felt colder now, but the cold had a clarity to it. It was time to turn fear into steps, and steps into action. When we stepped into the kitchen, Brenda moved with a kind of steady urgency. She grabbed the phone and started dialing. "Hello, I need the number of a criminal defense attorney who can handle an emergency," she said firmly, while I stood rooted to the floor, my hands trembling, still reeling from the discovery of Anna's letter and the envelope full of evidence. 2 hours later, a man named Richard Roth arrived at the house. He looked to be in his mid-50s, with salt and pepper hair and a calm, no-nonsense demeanor that somehow made the air feel a little steadier. He carried a worn leather briefcase and a yellow legal pad tucked under his arm. "Mrs. Harris," he said with a respectful nod as we sat down in the living room. Brenda gave me a quick overview, but I'll need to hear everything from the beginning. And so, I told him, again. The request for money. My suspicions about Anna and Daniel's financial troubles. The strange dinner. The plate switch. Anna's chilling confession. The oleander jar. The handwritten lists. The letter. Every shred of betrayal we had unearthed in my own home. Mr. Roth's pen scratched across the notepad as he listened. Occasionally he stopped me to confirm a date or press for a small detail. When I finally finished, he looked up, his expression grave. "Mrs. Harris, this is not just disturbing, it's criminal. What you've described constitutes attempted murder in the first degree. Between the physical poison, the documents detailing premeditation, and your daughter's confession, the evidence is overwhelming." The words felt like a blow to my chest. "Attempted murder," I whispered, barely able to force the words out. "If this goes to trial, your daughter could be facing 15 to 25 years in prison," he said gently but firmly. The air seemed to leave the room. 25 years. I repeated, my voice cracking. "That's most of her life." She'd grow old in prison. Is there no other way? Nothing that doesn't destroy her future completely. Mr. Roth leaned forward, folding his hands. I understand your instinct as a mother. But this wasn't a heat-of-the-moment mistake. She studied methods of poisoning, she documented her plan, and she even rehearsed how to act after your death. That kind of preparation makes the case very strong. However, he paused, choosing his words carefully, because you survived, there may be room for a plea deal. The prosecution might be willing to reduce charges in exchange for a guilty plea. What if I don't press charges? I blurted, clinging desperately to any option that didn't end with Anna behind bars. What if I just let her go and never bring this up again? Before Mr. Roth could respond, Brenda's voice cut through the room, sharper than I had ever heard it. Margaret, do you hear yourself? You want to let someone who tried to kill you walk away. What happens when she and Daniel get desperate again? Who's next? Are you willing to gamble someone else's life on the hope that they'll suddenly change? Mr. Roth gave a slow nod. She's right. Legally, once a crime of this severity is discovered, we are obligated to report it. If we don't, you and Brenda could be considered accessories after the fact. This is no longer a private family matter, Mrs. Harris. This is attempted homicide. My throat closed around the word homicide. My own child had turned my kitchen into a crime scene. The same kitchen where birthdays were celebrated and holiday dinners were cooked was now tainted forever. What happens next? Brenda asked, stepping in again as she saw me struggling. First, Mr. Roth said, we preserve all evidence. Nothing more is to be touched with bare hands. The police need to see everything exactly as it is. Second, we file a formal report. Third, we secure a protective order against Anna and Daniel to keep them from contacting or approaching Mrs. Harris. How long will all of this, take? I asked, barely above a whisper. The investigation and court process could take months, possibly over a year, he said. But immediate protective measures, like a restraining order, can be put in place within 24 hours. His eyes fixed on mine. Mrs. Harris, until then, you cannot be alone. It's too dangerous. Do you have a safe place to go? Brenda didn't hesitate. She's staying with me. I've got a security system, cameras, and neighbors who pay attention. She won't be left alone for a second. For the first time all day, I felt the faintest glimmer of relief. But it was buried under the crushing weight of a single truth: the battle was no longer between a mother's heart and her daughter's betrayal. It was now between justice and survival. And there was no way back. It would be much harder for Anna to try anything while I stayed at Brenda's house. Her insistence that I come live with her filled me with a sense of relief I hadn't felt since this nightmare began. Mr. Roth wasted no time once I agreed. He made the calls with the efficiency of someone who had handled too many tragedies like mine. First, he contacted the police, informing them of the attempted homicide and requesting a crime scene team. Then he called the courthouse clerk's office to start the process for an emergency restraining order. The police will be here in about an hour, he told us as he hung up the phone. They'll need to collect statements, photograph the evidence, and secure everything properly. This is now officially a criminal investigation. My throat tightened. What's going to happen when they arrest Anna? I asked, each word dragging against my heart. Are they going to show up at her house with sirens and handcuffs? Will this be all over the news? Mr. Roth leaned forward, his expression serious. That will depend on the department's decision. They might call her and ask her to surrender herself, but given the seriousness of the planning involved, it's more likely they'll execute a direct arrest. As for publicity, we'll try to keep this quiet, but once charges are filed, court records are public. I can't promise it won't draw attention. The thought of neighbors, church friends, and even strangers reading about Anna's betrayal made my stomach turn. Shame tangled with the pain already twisting inside me. Everyone will know my daughter tried to kill me. They'll think I failed as a mother. Brenda wrapped her arms around me before I could collapse under the weight of those words. No, she said firmly, her voice cutting through my despair. People are going to see you as the woman who had the courage to survive and stand up for the truth, even when it shattered your heart. Anyone who judges you doesn't deserve a place in your life. When the police arrived, the sight of the detectives made everything surreal. A woman named Detective Karen Miller introduced herself, along with her partner, Detective James Evans. They moved through my home with quiet authority, photographing the jar of oleander, the latex gloves, the damning notes, and the letter Anna had written. Evidence bags replaced the items that had once belonged to my daughter. My kitchen, my safe place, was now an official crime scene. Detective Miller took my statement with a calm, compassionate professionalism. When I finished, she looked at me with steady eyes. Mrs. Harris, this is one of the clearest cases of premeditated attempted homicide I've ever seen. Your daughter and son-in-law are facing extremely serious charges. I know this is devastating, but reporting it was the right thing to do. The arrest came at dawn the next morning. Brenda and I were sitting at her kitchen table, drinking coffee in silence, when my phone rang. My hands trembled as I answered. Mrs. Harris, this is Detective Miller, the voice said. We've just arrested your daughter at her residence. Daniel Harris is still under hospital care but remains in police custody. I nearly dropped the phone as the weight of her words sank in. Relief and grief collided inside me, leaving me shaky and numb. She resisted at first, denied everything, Detective Miller continued, but when we presented her with the evidence, she broke down. There will be an arraignment this afternoon at 3 o'clock. You may attend if you choose, but it isn't required. I squeezed Brenda's hand for strength. What happens now? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. We also uncovered additional materials at Anna's house, Miller said carefully. A notebook containing multiple backup plans if the poisoning failed. This wasn't a desperate act, Mrs. Harris. It was one step in a much larger scheme. The words hit like a punch to the chest. My daughter hadn't just tried to poison me, she had mapped out alternatives, prepared for contingencies. She was determined to end my life one way or another. What kinds of backup plans? I whispered, barely able to breathe. I'd rather not discuss the specifics over the phone, Miller said, her tone measured. But it's important you understand, this was no moment of panic. This was a calculated operation. We've also learned Daniel's debts are deeper than we realized. He owes money to individuals connected to organized crime. When the call ended, silence filled the kitchen like a heavy fog. I sat motionless, clutching the phone, while Brenda respected the space I needed. At last, I spoke, my voice trembling but steady enough to form the truth I had been avoiding. Brenda, I said, I think I want to go to the arraignment. I need to look her in the eye, I told Brenda, my voice steady though my chest ached. I need to hear what she has to say now that she can't twist the truth anymore. Brenda frowned, her hand resting gently on mine. Are you sure, Margaret? It's going to be brutal. Seeing Anna in handcuffs, hearing the charges read out loud, do you really want to put yourself through that? She leaned closer, her tone soft but serious. You don't have to sit there and watch. Justice will move forward whether you're in the room or not. I shook my head. No. I've spent my entire life shielding her from consequences. I defended her when she skipped out on responsibilities, covered for her when she hurt others, gave her second chances when she didn't deserve them. I always fixed things for her. This time, I won't. I need to see her face what she's done. For the first time in days, I felt a clarity that cut through the fog of heartbreak. We arrived at the courthouse 2 hours early. The stone building loomed ahead of me, cold and unforgiving, as if it were carved from the very weight of justice itself. David Miller met us at the entrance, his expression as grave as his words. "When Anna comes in, she'll be wearing restraints and a correctional jumpsuit," he explained, lowering his voice. "The judge will read the formal charges: attempted first-degree murder, conspiracy, and possession of a controlled toxic substance with intent to harm. Afterward, her lawyer will argue for bail, but the prosecution will fight to keep her detained. Be prepared. It won't be easy to hear." Inside, the courtroom felt colder than I expected, with fluorescent lights that drained the room of warmth and wooden benches that seemed built for discomfort. Brenda and I sat in the front row, David just behind us. My heart pounded so loudly I was certain the clerk could hear it echoing across the chamber. When they brought Anna in, my breath caught. Her hair was tangled, her face swollen from crying, and the orange jumpsuit made her look smaller than I'd ever seen her. For a moment, I almost pitied her. But then she looked up and spotted me. The sorrow in her eyes hardened into something darker. Hatred. "Mom," she muttered as she was led past me, her voice low but sharp as a blade. There was no apology, no remorse, only blame. "Are you really doing this? Are you really going to tear your own family apart?" I didn't answer. My heart was breaking, but I refused to let guilt undo me. She wasn't sorry. She was furious that I had stopped her. Judge Thompson, an older man with a stern but measured presence, entered and called the session to order. "The State of Illinois versus Anna Harris," the clerk read. "Charges of attempted murder in the first degree, conspiracy to commit murder, and possession of a toxic substance with criminal intent." The prosecutor rose, his voice carrying across the courtroom with precision and weight. He laid out the evidence piece by piece: how Anna had researched poisons, how she'd purchased oleander and hidden it in my home, how she had written detailed plans in her own hand. He held up a sealed evidence bag containing the jar of poison, then another with the notebook filled with her notes. "This was not a rash decision," he said firmly. "This was a deliberate, calculated attempt to murder her mother, Margaret Harris, in order to secure nearly $3 million in inheritance money. The fact that she failed was not due to hesitation, but due to circumstances beyond her control. This was not a crime of impulse. It was cold, intentional planning." I watched Anna slump in her chair as each detail was read aloud, her bravado slipping. For the first time, I saw her face crumple as the prosecutor described her internet searches and her contingency plans if the poison didn't work. "How do you plead?" Judge Thompson asked. Her attorney, a young man who looked barely prepared for a case of this magnitude, leaned in and whispered to her. Anna's voice was barely audible. "Not guilty." The prosecutor didn't flinch. "Your Honor, we have physical evidence, written documents, and even statements made by the accused. Furthermore, investigators recovered alternative plans designed to ensure the crime succeeded if the poison failed. That shows persistent, dangerous intent." Anna's lawyer attempted to salvage her position, arguing that she was under tremendous emotional and financial strain, that she was a mother herself, that she had no criminal record. He pleaded for bail, insisting she was not a danger to the community. But the prosecutor countered swiftly. "A woman capable of plotting the death of her own mother for money poses an extraordinary risk to society. This was not desperation, it was greed. If released, there is no reason to believe she would stop attempting to harm the victim or others. Bail should be denied." The courtroom fell silent as the judge considered both sides. I sat there, staring at the daughter I had once rocked to sleep, the girl whose scraped knees I had bandaged, now sitting in shackles because she had wanted me dead. And for the first time in my life, I knew I could no longer protect her. I had to let justice speak for her instead. His words reverberated through the courtroom like a final verdict etched in stone. As the legal arguments unfolded, Anna's gaze never left me. It wasn't the look of a daughter crushed by guilt, begging for her mother's forgiveness. No, it was the glare of someone who believed I had wronged her, as though reporting the truth of her attempt on my life was some sort of betrayal. When Judge Thompson finally delivered his ruling, his voice carried the full weight of authority. Given the deliberate planning behind these crimes, the overwhelming evidence presented, and the fact that the intended victim is the defendant's own mother, I find that the defendant poses an extreme danger to the community. He looked directly at Anna. Bail is denied. The defendant will remain in custody until trial. The crack of the gavel echoed like thunder. Anna collapsed in tears, her sobs filling the courtroom. "Mom," she screamed, thrashing as the officers took her by the arms. "Mom, please. You can't do this, I'm your daughter. I'm your only family." But I stayed silent. Watching her being led away in chains was one of the most gut-wrenching experiences of my life, and yet I knew it was necessary. For the first time in 37 years, I did not rush to shield her from accountability. Outside, David Miller walked beside us, his voice low but firm. "Now comes the hardest part. The legal process will take months. Anna will likely attempt a plea bargain to reduce her sentence." His eyes softened. "Margaret, are you prepared for that? Because it's going to get darker before there's any light." I drew in a shaky breath, but my answer was steady. "I'm ready. For the first time, I truly am. I should have let her face consequences years ago. Now I will." The next 3 months were a blur of court hearings, depositions, and shocking discoveries. David kept me informed of every development, but each update chipped away at the image of the daughter I thought I had raised. One afternoon, during a meeting in his office, David leaned forward, his face more serious than usual. "Margaret, there's something you need to know." The way he hesitated made my stomach twist. The investigation uncovered evidence that this wasn't Anna's first attempt to harm someone for financial gain. I felt my breath catch. "What do you mean, not her first?" My voice was barely above a whisper. David opened a thick folder, his tone careful but unflinching. 2 years ago, Daniel's mother suffered a fall down a staircase. At the time, it was believed to be an accident. But investigators now believe Anna staged the fall deliberately. The woman survived, but with permanent injuries. Until now, no one questioned it. I covered my mouth, trembling. The thought that my daughter might have tried to kill before, and gotten away with it, was unbearable. "That's not all," David continued, sliding more documents across the desk. "We also found reports that Anna had been stealing from elderly neighbors. She'd offer to do their shopping, then pocket the difference or overcharge them. Small amounts at first, but over time it added up. Every page felt like a blade carving away the last remnants of the child I thought I knew. Why didn't anyone tell me?" I asked, my voice raw with disbelief. Why didn't anyone warn me that my daughter was capable of hurting people? "They looked like isolated incidents," David explained quietly. "A fall. A bit of missing money. Nothing that seemed criminal on its own. But now the DA is using this history to argue that Anna is a repeat offender, a predator who exploits those weaker than her. It will weigh heavily against her when sentencing comes." I leaned back in my chair, numb. My daughter wasn't just desperate, she was dangerous. Over the following weeks, Anna tried reaching me again and again. Phone calls from the jail. Letters in shaky handwriting. Even messages passed through acquaintances. Each attempt was intercepted, thanks to Brenda, who stood guard over my peace like a sentinel. One afternoon, as we sat by her fireplace, another unopened letter in my hand, Brenda asked quietly, "Aren't you even curious about what she wants to say?" The flames licked at the edges of the envelope as I held it over the fire, my heart heavy. I didn't answer right away, because deep down, I already knew the truth. Whatever Anna had to say, it wasn't an apology. It was another attempt to pull me back into her darkness. And I couldn't let her drag me there again. "Don't you want to know if she's finally sorry?" Brenda asked me one evening as we sat in her garden, sipping tea and watching the sun sink low behind the trees. "No," I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my tone. "Because I already know she isn't. Anna isn't sorry for what she did. She's sorry she got caught." I took another sip, the warm bitterness grounding me in a way I hadn't felt in years. My daughter has spent her whole life finding the right words to twist my emotions, to make me question my instincts, to give her yet another chance. But not this time. I'm not opening the door again. The real reckoning came when Daniel finally recovered enough to face questioning. David Miller called me afterward, his voice taut with a mixture of relief and disgust. "Margaret, Daniel admitted everything," he said. "But he's trying to push all the blame onto Anna. He told the DA she orchestrated everything, and he only went along because he was afraid of what she might do." "Do you believe him?" I asked quietly, though deep down I already knew the answer. David sighed. "The evidence shows they were partners in this, both equally guilty. But here's the part that chills me: Daniel swears Anna was planning to poison him after she killed you. He claims she wanted the entire inheritance for herself." The words hollowed me out. My daughter hadn't just betrayed me, she had marked her own husband for death as well. Her greed had no limits, no conscience, no boundaries. 2 weeks later, the day I had both dreaded and waited for finally came, the plea hearing. David explained it plainly beforehand. "Anna's agreed to a deal. She'll plead guilty to attempted murder in the second degree. In exchange, the prosecution will recommend a 15-year sentence, no chance of parole." 15 years, I repeated slowly, the number pressing down on me like a stone. My daughter, my only child, was going to spend the next decade and a half in prison. The reality hit me hard. By the time she's released, I may no longer be alive. "It's possible," David admitted gently. "But it's also possible prison will force her to reflect, to face herself. Maybe she'll come out different." His optimism sounded thin, but I appreciated the kindness behind it. The hearing itself carried none of the drama of the earlier sessions. Anna entered not with defiance, but with resignation. Her shoulders slumped, her hair unkempt, her eyes hollow. When the judge asked if she understood the charges, she gave a faint nod. When asked if her guilty plea was voluntary, she hesitated, then whispered, "Guilty." But the moment that mattered most came when the judge allowed me to speak. The victim impact statement. My chance to finally say everything I had carried in silence for months. I rose from my seat slowly, every step heavy with the weight of my years. I turned to face my daughter. "Anna," I began, my voice steady but cold, "for 37 years I loved you without limits. I protected you. I defended you. I forgave you, over and over again. But I cannot forgive this. I cannot forgive the fact that you planned to kill me, your own mother, for money." Her face crumpled, tears streaming down her cheeks. But I pressed on. "Don't cry for yourself, Anna. Cry for the mother you threw away when you decided my life was worth less than your husband's debts. Cry for the bond you shattered when you chose poison over truth. Cry for the woman you've become, because that woman is not the daughter I raised." "Mom, please," she whispered, her voice broken. I lifted my hand to silence her. "No. I am not your mother anymore. A daughter who plots her mother's death gives up the right to call her that." The courtroom was silent, every eye fixed on us. I turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I request a permanent order of no contact. No letters, no calls, no messages, during her sentence or after. I want no ties left between us." The judge's gaze was grave as he nodded. "So ordered." He looked to Anna. "Miss Harris, for the crime of attempted murder in the second degree, this court sentences you to 15 years in state prison, without the possibility of parole. Furthermore, you are prohibited from initiating any form of contact with the victim for the rest of your life." The gavel came down with finality. Anna collapsed in sobs, reaching out as deputies moved to restrain her. "Mom. Please. I'll change. Don't do this." But I didn't answer. I stood firm, watching the daughter I once adored disappear behind the same doors she had chosen for herself. For the first time in my life, I let her face the weight of her own choices, alone. The gavel struck with unyielding finality. Anna was escorted away in handcuffs once more, but this time, there were no screams, no desperate cries of my name. She walked silently, a hollow shadow of the daughter I once knew, and I understood in that instant that I would never see her again. A year later, my life had transformed in ways I could never have imagined. I sold my textile business to a national corporation that had pursued it for years, securing far more than I would ever need to live comfortably. With the proceeds, I purchased a modest yet charming house just a few blocks from Brenda, who had become the sister I never had, my unwavering anchor through the storm. "Do you regret it?" Brenda asked one afternoon as we shared coffee in my new kitchen. She had asked the question countless times over the past year, and my answer had never changed. "Do I regret reporting Anna?" I asked, looking out the window at my small garden, where newly planted flowers swayed gently in the breeze. "No. I regret failing her as a mother. I regret not establishing boundaries when she was young. I regret missing the warning signs that she could become capable of such darkness. But I do not regret stopping her before more harm was done." Life without Anna brought an unexpected freedom. For decades, I had been trapped in constant vigilance, anticipating her next deception, excusing her lies, and managing her manipulations. Now, for the first time in years, I slept through the night without fear gnawing at me. "Detective Miller called yesterday," I told Brenda, recalling the conversation. "They've arrested the lenders who were extorting Daniel." Apparently, my report helped dismantle a network of predatory loan sharks targeting families across the city. Brenda's face lit with quiet satisfaction. "Eleanor, by doing the right thing, you didn't just protect yourself, you protected countless other families from falling victim to the same manipulations. You are stronger and braver than you realize." During those months, I also began volunteering at a domestic violence support center. My experience with Anna had given me a unique insight into how familial manipulation can escalate to dangerous extremes. "It's shocking how many women come through here with similar experiences," I told Brenda one evening after a long day at the center. "Stories of children harming their parents?" she asked, surprised. "I thought your story was one of a kind." "Not exactly," I said. "But many families experience emotional manipulation on a daily basis. Adult children use guilt, fear, and isolation to control their parents, and boundaries often go unrecognized or punished. In my case, it escalated to attempted murder, but the patterns of manipulation had existed for years. One afternoon, as I was sorting through belongings I had salvaged from my old home, I found a box of family photographs. Pictures of Anna from infancy to adulthood stared back at me, moments I had once treasured, moments I had believed captured her innocence and our bond. Brenda found me sitting on the floor, surrounded by those frozen memories. "What are you going to do with them?" she asked softly, sitting down beside me. She knew the weight of this choice, the unspoken grief it carried. "I'm going to keep some from her childhood," I said, carefully separating the images. "That little girl existed. She deserves to be remembered." The photographs of Anna as an adult were different. The woman she became, the one who had planned my death, is someone I cannot honor. Those images I set aside, leaving them to be destroyed. The process of deciding which memories to preserve and which to let go was unexpectedly cathartic. It allowed me to separate the daughter I had loved from the woman who had betrayed me so completely. "You know what's the saddest part?" I asked Brenda, watching the photographs burn in the fireplace, their flames consuming the faces I could no longer embrace. "That I'll never know the exact moment she changed," I whispered. The moment the sweet child I raised became someone capable of plotting my death. Brenda reached over and squeezed my hand. Maybe it doesn't matter, Eleanor. Some things are beyond our control. What matters is that you survived and chose to live your life with honesty, courage, and integrity. I nodded, feeling the warmth of the fire and Brenda's presence settle around me. Life had changed, irrevocably, but for the first time in decades, I felt a sense of peace. I was no longer bound by fear, manipulation, or guilt. I had reclaimed my life, and in doing so, had discovered a resilience I never knew I possessed. What matters, Brenda said softly, is that you stopped her before it was too late and finally chose your own life over her manipulation. 6 months later, I received news I hadn't anticipated. Mr. Roth called, his tone careful. Margaret, there's been an incident at the prison. Anna was attacked by other inmates who discovered she attempted to harm her mother. I felt a strange detachment. How bad is it? I asked. She's in the prison hospital, he replied. Her injuries are serious but not life-threatening. Legally, I have to notify you since you're technically her next of kin. The revelation affected me far less than I expected. I had already made peace with the consequences of my decision. Is she asking to see me? I asked, even though I already knew my answer. Yes, Mr. Roth admitted. She claims she needs to discuss something important about the case. But Margaret, you have no obligation to see her. The no-contact order remains in effect unless you specifically lift it. I'm not going, I said firmly. Anything she wants to say can go through her attorneys. I'm done shielding her from the repercussions of her choices. The phone call ended, and I felt a strange sense of closure, a confirmation that I had acted correctly. That evening, Brenda and I prepared a small celebratory dinner. We had begun calling it my rebirth, a commemoration of the day I finally chose myself over a toxic family bond. It had been exactly 1 year since I reported Anna, and I wanted to mark the moment with intention. You know the irony? I said, raising my glass of red wine. Anna spent so much energy scheming for my money that she never realized what I valued most. Brenda smiled warmly. And what is that? I looked around my cozy home, filled with peace and sunlight, where I could trust the people around me and relax without fear. This, I said. The quiet, the safety, the freedom to choose your companions, Brenda added, clinking her glass against mine. And genuine friendship, without strings, manipulation, or demands for anything. Just honesty and support. Her words resonated. I realized that for the first time in decades, I wasn't constantly guarding myself against betrayal or coercion. The smile on her face was sincere and effortless, nothing like the calculated expressions I had endured from Anna for years. As dinner concluded, a clarity settled over me. Brenda, I think I'm finally happy, I admitted. Truly happy, without fear. I'm not worrying about Anna's next scheme. I'm not walking on eggshells to avoid triggering her. I'm not weighed down by guilt for things I didn't do. You look different, Brenda observed gently. You look free. And she was right. Freedom isn't about wealth or a perfect life, it's about living without fear and reclaiming your own power. For the first time since Anna was a child, I felt unshackled. Later that night, before bed, I wrote in the journal I had begun after the trial. Today marks 1 year since I chose to save myself. 1 year since I decided I deserve a life without fear, without manipulation, without having to buy love or silence. Anna tried to take my life to gain an inheritance. Yet, in a strange twist, she gave me the most valuable gift possible, my freedom. I closed the journal and gazed out the window toward Brenda's house, the light in her kitchen a beacon of steadfast support. I knew that if I ever needed her, she'd be there, just a short walk away. For the first time in decades, I had a real family, a chosen family built on respect, trust, and authentic love, not blood ties or coercion. At 70, I had finally found a home in which I could be myself, unafraid, at peace, and fully alive. No one here would try to poison my food. No one would manipulate me or control me through fear. Every day was now a chance to live fully, safely, and with clarity. I whispered softly to myself before turning off the light, a quiet affirmation of the life I had claimed: I am free. I am safe. I am alive.